Hello everyone, Action here, hope you're doing fine. Welcome to my channel. Today we'll be going through the first dev diary review of the channel, and it's one of the biggest dev diaries I've ever seen, one of the biggest of Stellaris itself, because it sets up the open beta for the 4.0 update, which is coming very soon. So the dev diary comes with a bunch of information, and those informations are not necessarily very easy to understand from just reading it. So I'm gonna go and review all of it with you, and also use some gameplay examples from the open beta that I have played myself, and hopefully it will clear out all of your doubts. But if you still by the end of the video have any doubts, please leave in the comment section and I will respond to all of your questions. So first we have the databank. So the databank is basically a place where you can see all of the aspects of Stellaris, like agendas, alloys, anomalies, pretty much a tutorial for people to understand. It's a nice little thing to have. We also have the new species modifications tab. Now this one is very good, much better than what we have already. Here we have our template modification, and we have one section for the positive traits and another one for the negative. We also can do this, which is subspecies integration. So before patch 4.0, what we had was tons and tons of subspecies that were created by events or by just some, or if you had xenocompatibility, it was just a mess. Now with this enabled, all of our subspecies will be merged into the main species. Then we would have, let's say, one set of Panuris and only one set of Mirash. Now the devs also added the Empire timeline, which is basically a story mode for our Empire. It's pretty good. I like this very much, and especially the Empire focus, those are great. What they do is they set up some tasks for you to complete, and once you complete those tasks, you get some bonuses towards your Empire focus. Now you can choose your focus and you can change it once every year, so you're not tied to a focus for the rest of the game. And once you complete those, you are going to advance through some tiers. Now those tiers are gonna reward you with certain technologies, and at least from what I have seen before, the tier 10 for development will grant you mega engineering as a research option, which is fantastic because everyone has gotten into endgame and still not had rolled mega engineering as a research option. Now those progressions and task rewards won't give you the technology research, it will only grant you the research option. But since it is a free thing you're getting, it's very good, and those Empire focus will change the way your Empire develops. Now the Conquest one already gives you a technology by the end of it, which is this one right here, Existential Campaigns, making you capable of using the Existential Expulsion Casus Belli. Now it is the same Casus Belli the Crisis has, the Crisis Aspirant Empires. It basically removes the necessity for a Colossus, since it is a total war casus belli. They have also added the Logistic Upkeep for military vessels and for planets in general. So Logistic Upkeep is basically trade value upkeep, and you're gonna be producing trade value with all empires that include Gestalt empires, and this Logistic Upkeep is gonna increase depending on what type of system you are. So if you are in a friendly system, it is going to be very minimal, just like this one. But if you are in neutral system, it's gonna double, and on hostile territories, it's gonna increase it even further. They said it is to account for the reality of things, since if you are in a war, it's much harder for you to transport logistics to your vessels. And we can see this example in practice. Here our fleet is outside our borders, and it has a logistic upkeep of 0.10. Now if we go here and send them to our system, their logistic upkeep reduces to 0.05, essentially by half. And if we dock those ships at our station, it reduces to 0. And that goes for our battleships as well. And here we can see that the logistic upkeep of a battleship is about 8 times the one of a corvette. And coincidentally, the naval size of a battleship is also 8 times the one of a corvette. So maybe we're seeing a pattern there. And because of this, trade is now a resource that can be used in the galactic market. So you can now buy energy, which makes a lot more sense, right? Since why was trade energy in the first place? Now, one of the biggest changes is the pop changes, and pops are now divided into pop groups. So pop groups are divided in 4 categories, depending on strata, species, ethics, and factions. So since the open beta does not have factions yet, you can see that the Mirage workers are only one pop group because they are all from the same faction and they are all from the same ethic, the materialists one. Now the Panuri, on the other hand, they are divided into 2 Panuri specialists, or even more, 3 at this case, because one group is a spiritualist, the other one is egalitarian. The Panuri workers, the same thing. Then we have the Panuri elites, which also is the same thing, and they are called elites now instead of rulers, but basically the same thing. The devs have renamed bonus workforce to job efficiency, which is a little bit more clear for us players. Now, they also talked about so many issues that are happening in the open beta right now that we should be aware of. And here is the important part where they talk about the open beta release notes. Some of them we already covered before in the same video, but now we have it more detailed. And if you're liking this video, please don't forget to hit that like button because it helps out the channel so much in those early days. So they talk about pop groups that we already covered. They talk about one very important detail, which is that all pop groups can now grow at the same time. So in our example Empire, for instance, in the current patch, the Panuris would be the main species and they would be the ones growing, whereas the Mirage would have 0 pop growth because you could only have one. In the 4.0 branch, we will have both groups producing pops at the same time, but only one of them will get the pop growth bonuses, so only the Panuris or the Mirage will have the bonuses. However, Xenocompatibility has been drastically changed. It no longer is that monstrosity that used to haunt our PCs, instead grabs all the pop growth bonuses from your species in the planet and equally divide it amongst them. So it's kinda good for a regular pop growth between all Xeno species in your planets, and I think it's a much better solution than to have hybrid monstrosities running around your planet. Pops are now increased in a factor of 100, so 100 pops now equals to 1 pop of the past. There is also a civilian stratum that represents the masses that do not generally contribute to the player's military economy, and civilians are intended to replace clerks, which will be removed in a future open beta update. And empires now begin with 2000 more pops, most of whom will be civilians. Now those extra pops represent around 20 extra pops in the current version. So this is a very large bonuses to our economy overall. We have the planet UI, zones, and workforce jobs. It is much better for me to show you what has changed here than to read this because it's quite not easy to understand. So what we have in our planets now are those districts and buildings. So every district section is gonna allow you to build 3 buildings. So our city districts allow us to build 3 of those. One is already occupied by our capital, but we can choose the other ones. I have chosen the administrative office, but we can put yet another one, either administrative park, administrative complex, and all sort of stuff. For the generator districts, we have buildings that are related specifically to energy, just as you can see here, and those buildings are unique to your planet. You cannot have more than one bioreactor, you cannot have more than one energy nexus, but some of them are not unique, just as resource silos. Most of them are though. In the current patch, you just build the energy grid and you upgrade it. However, here you can't upgrade your buildings. Instead, you can only build the upgraded version of it. So here we have one slot. Let's use for energy grid. It is done. Now we go and grab another energy nexus. So there they are, our 2 buildings, one increasing our technician output by 20% and the other one granting us job efficiency for technicians. Now those 2 are multiplicative with each other because one of them increases our workforce. So you can see here that we have 800 technicians that are producing the equivalent of 1248 POPs. The devs have also added a new feature, which is the rare resource modifications. In the current version, you need to build the mode harvesting traps, and it occupies some jobs to produce the rare resources, but now it modifies the technician jobs, and the technicians themselves are going to produce you volatile mode, which is also modified by the energy grids and energy nexus. So here we have a 77 modes production. If we go ahead and remove the energy grid, it reduces to 67 modes production. Now the same is valid for mining districts and agricultural ones. The mining ones are gonna get crystal mines and the food gas extracting wells. Another huge change was made to research. Apparently, I don't know if it's gonna be that way, but the city districts are the ones that are gonna give us the research jobs. And the research zones, which is this one right here, are gonna grant us more research output. So this research lab grants us plus 20% research output on top of some jobs, like 400 of each category. So in essence, we would have the same districts as we used to before, but our building slots are capped for each district. So the generator is gonna have 3 and etc. But we have 3 free zones that we can choose to build our special production buildings. So we have one for alloys that I have upgraded to the maximum amount, and we have one for research. Going further, we have the planetary management here of our population, and I really like this part because just as we did before, we can modify the number of POPs that are working in each segment. So for our bureaucrats, you can increase our workforce a little bit, and you can see that we have some slots available. Now, compared to the current version, we can only have one job decreased or increased for each job type. So let's say I have 20 bureaucrats. If I want to decrease the number of bureaucrats, I can reduce from 20 to 19. And sometimes it's a pretty large change. Let's say you have only 2 researchers and you want to reduce it just a slightly little bit. Oh, you can only reduce it by half. But with this system here, we can reduce it by less amount. So here we're gonna reduce our bureaucrats by 30 for each level, and here we can reduce our biologists by 60 for each level. Now those reductions are less than a POP because a POP equals to 100 at the current system, so it gives us more planetary management, especially in the early game since we won't have that many POPs available. And also research has been sectioned between biology, engineers, and physicists, which means we can now focus our research much better than before. Now the Empire focuses, we already talked about, but they are pretty straightforward. Trade is now a standard resource and is used in the market currency. The trade route system has been completely removed, which is fantastic for late game especially, and ships now have a logistical upkeep paid by trade based on whether they are docked, friendly, neutral or hostile space. And larger ships tend to have higher upkeep, and there is a very good boost to Juggernauts. They will reduce your logistical upkeep by 75% for whatever systems they are in, and that includes hostile territories. So sending out your Juggernauts in a battle, it's much more important right now. Planets now will have a logistical upkeep paid by trade based on their local resource deficit, which means if you have a planet that only produces energy and does nothing else, it's gonna have a certain amount of logistical upkeep. But if you have a planet that only produces research, they will require tons and tons of consumer goods, and that planet will have a higher logistical upkeep because of their local resource deficits. They have also added a ton of improvements. For instance, the colonization flow, which now is much more different because we can pre-select a colony designation and turn on the planet automation before colonizing a planet. Yeah, I've done it countless times to just forget about a colony for a couple of decades, and then it's just there as a colony designation, not doing anything. And colonization now completes when 100 colonies have grown or migrated to the new planet, which means you can no longer just colonize planets, grab that one pop and boom, make pops out of nowhere. You need to migrate those pops because once you colonize it, you're gonna have only one, and the rest of them can only go through migration, and it's a very slow process if you don't allow your people to migrate there. So I suggest you heavily do. It's more like real life, you know. When we colonize Mars, it's not like Mars is gonna have more populational growth than the entire Earth, which was sometimes the case for Stellaris planets. They have added some new UIs and some new galaxy settings that we're just gonna go ahead and see. So here we have the general settings. It hasn't changed a little bit, but in the advanced settings we have here the fleet upkeep logistic cost, which is a slider that directly affects the trade value upkeep for our planets or fleets. We can also have the habitable world's chance to rare instead of a specific number, and we can choose to enable or disable certain precursors. So let's say I don't like the Irasians, I can leave them disabled, or if I want to somehow force the Zronis to appear, I just leave them enabled. We also have some changes to our empire customization here. We have the background of our empire. I'm using the syncretic evolution, so I have the syncretic species. We have the home world, and we can choose between city and room, and this is much better for us. So now we can actually just select one instead of going around crazy, but the other sections haven't changed at all for us, pretty much all the same. Leader adjustments, they have changed how leaders will gain traits. Instead of gaining at every single level, they now received a trait on even levels. They've made some significant improvements to message and notification settings, which will probably fix that annoying charged storm spotted alert that was more like someone was invading your computer than a storm appearing, and a bunch of other event and notifications were changed to reduce the amount of pop-ups you receive. Some minor balance changes. Now curator insight cost increases due to empire size, and the internal vigilance essential perk can now be acquired early if you complete the unyielding tradition tree. So it's much easier for you to turtle out. If you just finish unyielding and grab internal vigilance, you can build some pretty nasty star bases at the beginning of the game. And here we have adjusted anomaly spawn rates to improve the pacing of the early game. So we are probably gonna have more anomalies appearing and therefore much more turbulent early games. There's a bunch of bug fixes, a small change to AI and UI UX, and a bunch of other changes to modding. So that's pretty much it for this dev diary. I'll be covering all of it, including any new changes and any new dev diaries. The next one's gonna be on March 20th. And once again, if you have any questions, leave in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.